Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. You have joined us in the summer of 2023, and we are talking about time, redeeming our time, being a good steward of time. What does that mean for us as Christian women pursuing success? And I am excited to have my friend, Lissa Figgins, here. Now, she is my go-to all around redeeming time, and I'm excited for her to speak life into you today around what does it mean to redeem time? Why is it important? And share a little bit of her story. So, Lissa, welcome to the podcast. Tell us about you.
Thank you. It is so great to be here. And I love getting to have conversations around something that affects every single person on the planet. Right. But we're also doing it from, hey, we're not just people, we're also daughters of the King. Right. And so our view of time should look different than the rest of the world's. And you teach people how to do business, in a different way than the rest of the world. And I teach women how to use their time in a different way. And really, a lot of this came from me listening to what women were saying when I would ask, like, how is life lately? And do you know what word I heard most often? It was the word busy, or some version of that. Oh, life's always busy. Oh, always busy, 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 or so many things on my plate, or so much going on, or, some version of that. And then, to be honest, like, I was hearing that come out of my mouth a lot too. And I've noticed that sadly it's become the norm. And it's even worn as a badge of honor, right? Like, I'm busy, I must be important. But honestly, inside, I know for me and for the hundreds of women that I've talked and asked this question to, we're really on the inside completely exhausted because we're literally being pulled in so many different directions with so much on our plate. And like, at some point, something's got to give, and usually it's us.
Yes. I love that you mentioned that busy as a badge, because I do think that is chronic. It is chronic in today's world. And you started with something that I think I just want to bring forward. And that is, we need to look at time differently and redeem our time differently as Christian women, as believers. So what does that mean to do that differently for believers?
Yeah. Well, the verse that I've really built everything that I do on, it was interesting. It came to me when I was really just praying about, I felt like God was stirring something in me in my business. I started as a life coach. I started as a health coach, right? And then I got into life coaching, which was great. But I felt like there are a lot of life coaches out there. What is it that God's really like put in my story and something that he's really equipped me with that can really help Christian women? And this whole idea of time came up. And so I was sitting in service, and our pastor was preaching from Ephesians 1, and he said the word redeem. And all of a sudden it just clicked. I was like, oh, redeeming your time. So I quickly flipped to Ephesians 5. So I wasn't that far off from where he was preaching. I was still paying attention, but here's what it says. Ephesians 5:16-17 says, "Look carefully then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time," or some versions say making the best use of it, because, and I love two different ways of saying this based on which version you're reading, either because the days are evil or because these are difficult days, right? Like, okay, so there's my why, right? Because, right, I'm not created for this world forever. This is just a small amount of time that I am here. And so that creates a sense of urgency about how I'm using my time in light of eternity, in light of what am I doing today with my time that's preparing me for that day when I will spend eternity in heaven with him. And that really shifts your perspective. And if you notice, there's a lot of action and intention in there. Look carefully, right? Not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming your time, making the best use of it. Like, these are very intentional things we have to do, because we all know if left to itself, time is a vacuum. It fills itself with something. And if we leave it to, the culture around us or even the people around us, they're going to fill it with their priorities, which may or may not be in alignment with what God is calling us to do.
There is so much there. I love that you point out that these are action words, right? And they are a call forward in the present moment. And we know, I think it's in Psalm 90, that, a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years a day. And there's this concept I've been so fascinated with. I talk about it in my book, but you also talk about this chronos versus kairos. We are so used to daily living in a chronos way. So tell us that difference, and really tell us, like, how can we embrace and walk in that kairos time of the Lord, if that's even possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love it's so interesting how those words are so similar to each other, right? Chronos and kairos are very close, and yet they mean there's overlaps in them because they both deal with time, but it's very different. So I found was really interesting is chronos is in the Bible 54 times. And that, like you said, is our ordinary daily clock time. It's what can be measured, right? I can measure this with my watch or with the phone on my, the clock on my phone. These are the minutes, the hours, the days, the months, the years. And the focus usually for chronos is quantity. How much time do I have, right? And another verse that I love going back to is just, like the Psalm 139. Like he knows all of our days before one of them even came to be. Like, I don't know how much time I have. I don't know how much chronos time God has given me. Now, I had one grandma live to 102 and my other grandma lived to 98. So my goal is to split the difference. I'm going for 100.
I love it.
Right around the time that people are listening to this. So I'm halfway, at this point in my life. And it creates that sense of urgency because I don't know if God is going to give me 100 years.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to look like. Right. So that chronos is focused on that quantity. But the kairos is actually in there more often. It's in there 86 times. And that is those moments, those ripe seasons. Like when you think about Ecclesiastes and it says there is a time for everything under the sun. And then it lists all these different seasons. And they're all like in those like this and this, like those opposite pairs, right? Yeah. Like, so that is not, I can't measure when that time is. I mean, I can kind of look and see about when does that, because God's created the world in order. So there's cycles and things like that. But it's more of a felt thing. And it's more of a spiritual alignment versus something that I can measure with a number. And it's usually outside of just my ordinary day and time. And so that one's really focused on the quality, right? Like the quality of the time and how deep my experience is in that versus how much of it I have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also, you mentioned sort of this, the positive way to look at a sense of urgency. Like I'm 55 and I think this all the time, right? Like, do I have enough time to do all the things? But then it comes down to, it's not really about what I want to do. It's really about what he wants to do. And I think positioning ourselves for those kinds of moments, those in due time moments, is about obedience. And it's about what? Redeeming your time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? Like how do we actually redeem our time? I think you've got some ways to, especially when we're like, I don't even have time to sit down and quantify my time so that I can
well, I'm going to say you don't have time not to have time to think about your time, because otherwise your time is, like I said, just going off to wherever. And if you don't actually take the time to be intentional about it, then you're just losing it. But what I like to say too, like when I think about time, like it's not just a calendar issue, right? It's not just a to-do list issue. It's a heart issue. And I like to say this all the time. Busy is not a disordered schedule or a disordered to-do list. It's a disordered heart. And it kind of comes back to your first question. I feel like the world's answer is, well, create this kind of to-do list or create this kind of time block schedule or, like they go right to the calendar, which is very good and very necessary. But I truly believe that, as followers of Christ, we have to look at our heart and our relationship with him first, because that is what drives where our time goes. When we look at Jesus' time here on earth, he was very intentional because he did life with God and he knew what he was here to do. And so he didn't waste time. I mean, we could say, well, he didn't have Netflix. He didn't have a cell phone or whatever, but even if he did, he was so in tune and in aligned because he had so much kairos time with his Father that he knew whose kingdom he was building. And I think that's really kind of a great question to ask, like at the beginning of your day or at the beginning of a time block or at the beginning, like, whose kingdom am I building? Am I building God's kingdom or am I building mine? And newsflash, only one is going to last and it's not yours. Right. So, I mean, he tells us seek first his kingdom, right? And he'll add, he'll take care of all those other things. And yet so often I think it looks at our time, even as believers, we still are oftentimes building our own kingdoms. And so I think that is, that's kind of something that we need to have that there. And so what I like to do is start with your heart and look at what's God's bigger vision for me and for this time that he's given me, and start with that, and then take it over into practical things around your time.
Yeah. Yeah. And really asking him to show us, because, left to our own devices, our heart will do what we want it to do. I love that you brought that back to a heart issue, because so often, especially for women in business, right? The world wants to tell us how we should use our time and how we can you can't find time. You can't make time. You can only find time. And you need to find the nooks and crannies and all of those sayings, when it all starts with, what are we building and for whom? Oh, that's so good. That is so
One of the things
good.
that's made the biggest difference for me, I have a sign right in front of my computer that I'm looking at right now. It says "with God," and right under it, I have my vision boards, right? Because I want to remember, like, God, the whole story of the Bible, from Genesis 1 to the very last verse of Revelation, is really one big story of God saying, I want to do life with you. Will you be with me? And I ran across that a couple of months ago. It's called the Emmanuel principle. And, I always heard around Christmas time, and I love, Emmanuel. It's such a great, God with us.
Right.
But then I really started thinking, like, no, this is like every day. Like, and when you read the Bible in that way, so I'm reading through the Bible this year chronologically, but I'm specifically looking for examples of what happens when we live life with him and use our time with him, and what happens when we don't.
Yeah.
It's you can see the huge difference, right? Between what that looks like. And, and so then, our time is a gift, right? Just like our money is a gift, just like our business is a gift. And we are called to steward it because it's from him for him.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Emmanuel, God is with you. Yes. Always, every day, always, in always. So as we get to the last few minutes, so I want you to talk to that busy woman who's like, yep, I'm all in. I'm redefining hustle. I'm pursuing success. I'm doing this God's way. But man, I just feel like my time is out of control. Or like I don't manage my time well, or I need to be better at time blocking. Like, what are just a couple of things that you can give her that are practical that she can implement?
Yeah. The first one is something really scary. Ready for this? Conduct a time audit. And I had somebody say to me the other day, she's like, that's really scary. I don't want to know where my time is going. I'm like, okay, which is scarier? Knowing where your time is going and having to face it, or not knowing where it's going and then getting to the end and having regret? To me, that is a worse scary. Yeah, okay. I may not like the results I'm going to see. Just like when I open up my bank account, right? If I'm not keeping track of where my money is going, I might not want to open up that credit card statement or that bank, account and look and see where it is. But if I don't, it's going to just get worse. And we tend to underestimate how much time we give away to less important things. We really do. And so when you do a time audit, it literally, like, you have to promise me when you do one, it is literally a no judgment zone. You're not making it mean anything negative or positive about you. You're just looking at, where is my time going? And once you can see it, ideally, like laying out a week so you can see the flow, now you can start noticing things about it and notice how that feels, right? And then you can say, oh, that feels really good. That's something, I feel like this is what God's calling me to do in this area. I'm really redeeming my time and investing it wisely. I want to keep doing that. But there will be probably a lot of things you're like, ooh, maybe not so redeeming there. Maybe not the best use of time. And that's where you can say, okay, so how could I change that? How could I improve it? But you can't change it if you're not aware of it. Yeah. So that's the first thing. You got to know where it's going right now. And I recommend doing that whenever you have a big transition in life, because of course things are going to change. Ideally, I do one of those like about once a quarter, because I've got some new things I'm focusing on each quarter. And so I really want to be intentional about, what does my time need to look like in this next season, for the next few months that are in front of me, especially with summer. We've, got maybe kids in college or kids home from school, and, life looks different. You're on vacation mode and whatever, but so it's somewhat different than it does during the school year. So that's the first one, is do a time audit and know where it's going. The second one is to build a time template, right? And so here's where you want to say, what would an ideal week look like? Because here's the thing. Some people are telling me, they're like, listen, I'm not a planner, but I'm going to tell you with 100% accuracy, I have asked every single one of them, and is that working for you? And you know what the answer was? No. So then I
Was
say to
that
them, well,
Dr. Phil moment?
exactly. Having some kind of a plan is at least, yeah, you're not going to execute 100%, but what if you execute 50% or
Yeah.
75%? At least having an idea of where you are wanting your time to go, just like you would with your money, right?
That's
It's
right.
helping you know where to put that in. And I'm a big proponent of you can't pour out until you fill up first. And as believers, that we have to get filled up with him first. And so the time blocking system I teach has refills in your day, 2 of them. And then it has pour outs in your day, which are 3 different times. And it's based on kind of who you're prioritizing during that time of your day. Because you can't pour from an empty cup.
That's right. So good.
Yeah. And then
So
the last
good.
thing is really just looking at interruptions and distractions as not just something happening to you, but like, what might God have in this for me? Oftentimes it's a look in the mirror that the problem is not the people and things around me that are distracting. The problem's really in here. It's my disordered heart.
Right.
And I need to, let go of something or redefine something or kind of come back to that. So.
Oh, so good. So good. Oh, I love all these tips. So Lissa, I know there are going to be people who want to connect with you. They're going to want to like really dig into this with you. So how do they find you?
Yeah. So the Redeem Her Time podcast is a great place to go because you can put me in your ear and do whatever life is, what's already filling your time, right? We look at your heart and at your calendar and look at how to make God at the center of it all. So Redeem Her Time is the name of the podcast. And then I do have a free guide that will help you to redeem your time. You can find it at my website or just go straight to redeemhertime.com/5. And for those moments when you feel like I'm going in a million directions and right, you just pause, spend 5 minutes going through this 1-page system, and you know exactly where your time should be going. And then you do it.
That's awesome. And I will have that link to that download, but also to the podcast, etc. All the ways that you can find Lissa down in the show notes. So make sure you get down there and get those. Lissa, it has been so awesome to have you on talking about time and redeeming time. Any last words for our listeners about redeeming time?
Yeah, just a reminder for those of us who we're planners, we're organizers, we like to feel like we have control over our time. I'm just going to tell you, you really don't. And I don't say that like in a way to go, oh, well, forget all this then, but like Proverbs 16:9 says, the heart of a man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. Right. And so I do believe there's intention. We already started with that in Ephesians 5. There's intention in how we make the best use of our time, but I'm holding it out and like saying, God, this is yours. You've given me this time. You've given me this purpose. I'm going to let you, do with it what you want. And I'm just going to be intentional with the role that you've given me. So remembering, although we would love to control it and plan everything, we can't. And that's okay because he holds all in his hands, and it's way, way better in his hands than it is in ours anyway. Right.
That hits me. I'm a planner, but I hear you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Lissa, thanks so much for being on. It was such a pleasure to have you. I know so many people are just going to eat this up, especially this time of the summer, and trying to hold on to all of those summer moments. And I love how you teach us to redeem time and connect that directly to Scripture. It's just exactly the way that I want to learn too. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.